Hi, Sarah. My name is Winifred, and I just have one question to ask you. So, we've been a part of your story and your incredible journey as well. But with all of that, I just want to know, do you sometimes deal with imposter syndrome? If you do, how have you been able to get out of that? How do you deal with it or navigate through it? Because I feel like sometimes when God tells us to do something, we think because of our past or because of what our past looks like, we don't really deserve to do it or we're not good enough for it. But I just want to know, how have you been able to push through and still do the will of God? Thank you.
Winifred, this question is so interesting to me because I often ask myself, like, is that imposter syndrome? Like the reason why you're questioning yourself, the reason why you are doubting yourself in this moment. But one of the things that I am beginning to realize is that I feel like the only reason why I have had impact in my ministry and with my life is because I've made a commitment to authenticity, whatever is authentic to me for that specific assignment. And so authenticity isn't necessarily saying I'm going to show up the same way every single time, as much as it is saying I'm going to show up in my truth, but I'm going to see if God blesses this truth. And so I have to say, well, some of you may have seen the story, some of you may not have. I was speaking at my father's church and I was there on my own. And at the time, backstory is at the time, I was questioning whether or not I would be a good candidate to be a part of the leadership team at the Potter's House Dallas, primarily because, I am going to give it to you the way God gives it to me. And sometimes it doesn't come off as eloquent and fancy as I think that it should. And so I was wondering, like, am I going to have to change myself to step into what God has called me to do? Or can I still be myself and it be effective? And I was having that going on in my own spirit, in my own mind. I get up to preach and my wig starts slipping. I take my wig off. I keep on preaching. And so that moment ends up going viral, right? All of these people see it. But what was crazy about it is instead of it being something that people just laughed at, it became this thing that people were inspired by, where they were like, when you took your wig off, it like snatched shame out of my soul. It gave me permission to be myself. Little did they know that as liberating as that moment was for them, it was liberating for me because it helped me to realize that God was trying to show me, like, if you will just be yourself in your rawest wig cap on state, I can use it. I can bless it. And so those moments where imposter syndrome tries to creep in, I remind myself that I'm not forcing this. I'm just standing in the force of what it is. I'm not pretending to be anyone other than myself, which is why I could be on TikTok cutting a turkey open and then turn around and post a preaching clip. It is important to me that as I present myself as a leader, as a thought leader and faith leader, that I do so in such a way that no one is ever caught by surprise at me being human and a woman and a girl who's on a journey. And so resist pretending, resist the need to live up to someone's expectation, resist the need to do what you've seen done before, and ask yourself and ask God instead, if you chose me to do this and you know who I am, you know where I went to school or didn't go to school, you know who my friends are or who my friends aren't, and you're still asking me to do this, then I'm going to show up in the truth of who I am, and I'm going to sit back and watch how you multiply whatever my offering is. That's been my testimony, and that is what has helped me to resist falling into the trap of imposter syndrome, because I am authentically being who I am and obedient to the places where God sends me. Dr. Anita has this saying about us playing out our childhood traumas and our relationships. Yeah. Do you agree with that?
Yes, 1,000%.
I feel 1,000%. Like we don't even realize some of our childhood trauma until we are in relationships. My relationship was part of the reason why I started digging, like, what's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What makes you start a podcast with your husband where you're talking about healing and like perhaps your own things coming up in the midst of this podcast?
Oh man, yes. So I think what made us start the podcast is realizing when he started going to therapy, how much that changed my life. I think I was like, okay, you need to go to therapy, quit playing, I'm not going to be your therapist anymore, all the things. But then he started going to therapy and it demanded of me. And I wasn't prepared for that. And I was like, oh, don't get too healed now.
Wait, what did it demand of you?
I think that I got really used to feeling entitled to more space in our relationship because I had done more work. And so...
Whoa. Okay, wait a minute. You have to break that down. So, yeah, what do you mean by that?
A lot of like, I'm the self-aware. I'm the one who's been in therapy for almost 10 years. So when I say this, I'm coming from this place, therapy jargon, and that's why we're doing what I want to do, right?
Okay.
And then he started healing, and it started illuminating the ways that we weren't sharing the space, the emotional real estate. It was all mine, and he was a tenant. Like, you get to be here for a little bit.
Calm down. Calm down. Because weaponizing healing is like...
As a therapist, yeah, God yoked me up quick. And as he was healing, he would say things like, that really hurt my feelings. And then I found myself falling into patterns of like, misogyny myself and being like, well, you just gonna have to get over it, when that would never be appropriate for him to do to me, right? And so when he started saying that, like, hey, it hurt when you expect me to get over that really quickly because you've made it clear that I can't track your healing for you. I just have to be along for the journey, and I'm asking you to do the same. And I was like, yes, in theory, but in practice, I don't know how I feel about this.
Okay, so let me tell you, all of us talking about we want our men, we want your man needs to go to therapy.
Yeah.
Which we do.
We do, for sure.
But what you're saying is we may not be ready for a man who is living in an awareness of his feelings and emotional state and deconstructing systems of patriarchy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it was so difficult to let him hurt.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Okay, so can I ask you a question? It's going to be so random.
Sure.
Are we calling sassy men just emotionally aware men? Like the sassy man apocalypse is this?
I think that there's a difference, but I think that in some ways, yes, I will say that. I have felt like sometimes we want the emotionally aware men, but we only want them to have those traits to serve us.
Oh my gosh.
But the reality is like they deserve to experience those traits within us. And we are beneficiaries of their own experience of feeling at home in their bodies and in their lives. And so I think that sometimes when we talk about like, oh, this sassy man, I cannot speak to every experience, y'all.
Right.
But what I can say is a lot of them are men who dare to be honest, and then we shame them for it, right? We want you to be honest enough to be faithful in the relationship, but not honest enough to tell you that I hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
Because then that cost me. And for me, I struggled, especially I'm like seminary grad, licensed therapist, like da. And God was like, and you're mean sometimes. Because there were ways that I just wanted him to be whatever I needed. But I'm not called to covenant with a thing. I'm called to covenant with a person.
Yeah.
Which means like they have their entire life. There are things that deeply wound him, deeply hurt him. And the same way I needed space to just share and unload how he had hurt me, like I needed to be able to reciprocate and allow him to share that without like, well, I did this and I tried this and I fixed this. And like, I think that one of the things I love most about my husband, and one of the things I think is sexiest about him, is his tenderness. Like he is strong. He's strong enough to look like the weakest person in the room, but be able to turn up and take all y'all down. You know what I'm saying? He's strong enough to cry in front of men who doesn't matter, in front of our kids. I've seen him worship in our living room, and our son come up and say, Daddy, why are you crying? And he's like, because God's been good to me. And that makes me cry happy tears. And like, that makes me tear up because I'm like, my son is going to grow up with the freedom to worship and the freedom to express because it was modeled for him. But that demanded of me to say, you are allowed to feel, and I will not judge how you feel based on the standards of what the world says Black men need to look like.
So that's a thing.
Yeah.
You've said quite a few things here.
Yeah.
That I don't even know, because I think a lot of times when we talk about healing the fractures between men and women as it relates to romantic relationships,
yeah,
it's generally talking about what the man has done wrong.
Yeah.
and ways that men need to grow up. Men need to rise to the occasion. Men need to be more emotionally aware. They need to do their work. And yet we have not prepared ourselves for what that evolved man would look like.
1,000%.
In Woman Evolving, they're like, we need man evolve. We need man evolve. We need man evolve. And basically, we want men who can serve the version of us we have become without taking any inventory at all about who we are going to become in order to serve this version of who they are.
Yes. And even saying, I want you to become this so that I can feel more safe with you.
Yeah.
What if the person that God is calling that man to be is not someone you feel comfortable with? It should be someone you feel safe with, emotionally, physically, all the things, but like maybe it challenges you. You know, I think we're so used to sometimes being the source of challenge for other people, calling people higher, that we forget that there are contexts in which we're going to be called higher. And for me, that was letting my husband's journey be his and not about how I could feel better. You know, so like a rule we have is when we go to therapy, we do not share what we talked about in therapy unless we want to. And we don't even put ourselves in this position where someone feels uncomfortable about, you asked me, so we don't ask. So the only time we know what's happened in therapy is when someone said, hey, I want to talk to you about what came up in therapy. You know, because his space, he deserves a space to be free the same way I deserve a space to be free. And me and my therapist be cutting up, you know? Like if I'm upset with somebody, I'm like, this is her Instagram. And like, can you pull up? No, not that one, the one down low. And so like he needs that same safe space. And I love that he has that. I want him to have that. And it also made me realize my life is not defined by his wellness. You know, that like I'm responsible. There's things in my life that I wanted to outsource to him. I wanted to outsource my self-esteem to him. You make me feel good instead of me build my self-esteem from internally. You make me feel secure and confident. Now, there's a part of relationship that's a part of that, but like the bulk of what I'm called to be is my responsibility. You are added onto that. You know, you support that, you complement that, you nurture it, but it has to exist because I've done the work for it to be there.
Okay, so when we talk about trauma playing out in relationships. I am recognizing when I met my husband, I was in a really great place. I bought my home in Texas. It was me and my 2 kids. I'd gotten out of a toxic marriage, and I was just finally at a place where I was like, I can trust myself. I love myself. My story doesn't make me cringe. I moved to Los Angeles, and I'm in this unfamiliar, fast-paced city without as much support as I had been used to. My brother was here. I had a family friend here. But that's drastic in comparison to how much support I had. And I found myself, I think, clinging to him creating my esteem, my confidence. And even if you don't move to a new city, you have a new baby, you lose a job, you take on a new job. Home is this place where it is where I should be able to find my footing. But because he's got his own thing and he's going through life himself, this may not be the place where I am finding my footing. And I think I found myself afraid anytime he had a bad day, even if it didn't have anything to do with me, at like, this isn't going to work. He's upset with me. What did I do? I've learned a lot and grown a lot, but I do think it goes back to that, putting all of our dependency on this one person's emotional state and making sure that they're offering us that sense of comfort. How do we identify the way that our trauma becomes a filter for maybe not just our partner's actions, but for everyone's actions? Like, how do I know, like, that's coming through the trauma filter, this is coming through the healed filter?
I think a question that I get my clients to answer is, what are your automatic expectations? And when did they start becoming expectations? Right? When did you automatically start feeling like if a friend missed your birthday, they didn't like you anymore? Like, what birthday did you realize, like, I now have this expectation? What are the things that you automatically expect people to do? And if they don't do them, you can say to yourself, I knew this was going to happen, or this was just like, or this always happens, right? Anytime we hear ourselves saying this always happens, or like, this is just like, or I can never, those point to patterns. Like those statements, they point to patterns and help us see there's something internally that's happened in the past that I am trying to resolve in the present, and I'm trying to protect myself in the future.
I'm trying to offer myself as tribute, but the way you came in here so violent, I'm not really feeling that. But I feel like being the sister that I am to the delegation, that I should offer myself as tribute so they can do their work. But Kobe, I just met you, and I'm telling you, if you drag me, I'm not so far from Eve that I won't kick back a little bit.
Listen, you got nails on, I don't. So let me just stay over here.
So you can help me. You can help me. Oh my gosh. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
So I was doing a podcast.
Uh-huh.
And the person at the end starts saying a lot of nice things about me.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. I don't like when people say nice things about me. Therapy me. Is that the trauma? Is that a trauma filter?
Well, I will say this. All healing starts with getting curious. And so before I make a judgment, I will ask questions.
Okay.
What do you feel in your body when someone compliments you?
Oh, you are just like Dr. Annie. That's why she likes you. Huh? I feel nerves, fear.
Where do you feel it in your body?
Oof. Like in my stomach.
Yeah. When else do you feel that in your stomach? When else do you have like that sensation in your stomach?
When I'm about to preach.
Yeah. What do you feel when you preach?
In it or before it?
In it.
Free.
Yeah. When we're free, we often feel seen. And being seen is vulnerable. Being seen is vulnerable. Being seen is intimate. And it can feel scary when someone who has not spent time with you sees something of you that is so intimate and so real, because it means that there's a part of you on the inside that's living on the outside, and the world can see it.
So when I don't like that, I don't like being seen that way?
No, I don't think it means you don't like being seen that way. I think it just is unnerving sometimes to be intimate with people who you are not intimate with. Rather, it's hard to feel like there are people who have access to intimacy with you that you have not chosen intimacy with.
Oh.
And that's what we would call a parasocial relationship. Like, you know of me and you know me partially, but you don't know me in here. So when you call out something in here that you can see from out there, all the way out there, oh, that means that the way I'm living, what I'm projecting is real. People see me. And when people see you, they can hurt you, right? They can celebrate you. They can lift you up. They can tear you down. And it's just a vulnerable way of existing.
Yeah. So if someone is choosing to live a life where they're like, you know what, I want to be free.
Yeah.
I want to be whole. Like, what do you think we have to surrender in order to live that way?
Certainty about anything. Certainty about what we think life is supposed to be like, what partnership is supposed to be like, who we are, who the people we are called to are, who God is. Like, remaining ultimately curious and just saying, like, I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to find out. I don't know. And even what I think I know, I'm willing to be found wrong.
Okay, this is so in my messages, I feel like it really has to be like, if it's for you, it's for you. And if it's not, it's not.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I have a responsibility as someone who is standing in the gap between people and what I perceive God is telling me.
Yeah.
To make sure that I cast a net wide enough to cover different circumstances and scenarios.
Yeah.
And so I was talking last month about, I got a bad report from the doctor. And there was on one hand where I was like, proclaim your healing.
Yeah.
Take your healing. Plead the blood of Jesus. Rebuke the disease.
Yeah.
But also, I had to wrestle with the reality that there were people who have done all of those things and still got the disease and still died.
Yeah.
And I did not want to set myself up or someone else up for this idea of God betrayed me by not giving me what it is that I prayed for.
Yeah.
But instead to stretch our reality in such a way that if this is the path that has been approved for you to take,
Yeah.
that sometimes healing is not necessarily the disease being gone.
Yeah.
Sometimes healing is God giving me the strength to walk this through and still be a light.
Yes.
Because if we only make it to where things have to turn out the way that I need them to be,
Yeah.
that's the only way I'll have certainty that God is with me, that God is real, is if he does it this way. Then we miss out on the opportunity of experiencing God's presence in suffering, God's presence in pain and in disease. And that's just a reality.
Yeah.
That God doesn't always show up in the way that we would have wanted him to.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that we can't access his presence now.
Yes. Yes. And one, that is powerful. Two, I'm sorry about whatever report you got. And I'll be praying for you for sure. But three, that makes me think back to the question you asked me about whether it's trauma the compliment. Just thinking that, like, you know, when you are thinking about sharing your experience, your lived experience, you're still processing how this is going to affect other people, right? And that's not a bad thing. It just means that you know you represent something. So I wonder when people compliment you, it's just like this external affirmation that I represent something. I represent these words that they're sharing to me. And what does that mean, right? Does that mean that I can never change? Does it mean that I can't evolve? You know, does that mean that I can't change? Or does that just affirm what God's told me, you know, behind the scenes? And that's still unnerving. So that was a thought that came to mind. But yeah, I think that a lot of us can identify with what it means to want to look for the manifestation of God's goodness in a person. And I don't think that's all bad. I think that's actually why we're designed for community. And you represent that for a lot of women who look like me.
Well, you tried to therapy me on the slide before you moved to the next thing. And I just wanted you to know I did pick it up.
Sorry, girl.
I don't know. I don't know if it's that. What my instinct tells me that it is that makes me uncomfortable is that, like, I do not think that I trust people to stay and believe the same thing about me. And I think that obviously I have experience that would point to that as a point of pain. But I think it's also just within the culture in general that, you know, you love someone, the next day they say something you don't like and then they're completely canceled. And so I think that I could receive it if it felt certain, if it felt like, I don't want to say if it felt like truth, but if it felt like something that I could really hang on to. But I do think definitely the inner child in me is like, reject it, don't receive it. Because if you come to trust it, they'll rip the blanket off of you and you'll be back in this situation. So I think that that's part of it. It makes me feel uneasy, even when, like, you know, the delegation shows me a lot of love and, like, I want to lean into it, but I also don't want to need it. I don't want to trust it. And so there's like this awkward dance of me not being able to really see the impact of my life, my ministry, the words, because I'm so afraid of it being taken away.
Yes. Wow. That's so real. And I think that there's actually a middle ground between, like, I fully accept it or I fully reject it, which could be, I'm grateful that how they feel about me right now aligns with who God says I am. And that may change, but it's really nice to hear God's words coming from somebody else in the moment. You know, and, like, saying, I can savor this right now. And if you hate me tomorrow, that's all right. I savored it yesterday. You know, the fruit from yesterday can't feed me today. It's already gone. It's already digested. So, like, I can appreciate that right now you saw a glimpse of who God sees me to be. And that's beautiful. That's good.
I got to figure out, because I just be sitting there awkwardly like, glitching. Definitely glitching. Definitely don't know what to say back. You're welcome.
And you got the script in your head. Yeah, you're like, thank you so much. That means so much. And they always do this.
Right here, because this is where it went. I just want you to know, regardless of how much I'm glitching, it made its way in here.
Thank you so much. That means the world.
Prayer hands? Prayer hands is when you've said something.
Universal. When they're going going on a little too long, and you're just like,
For sure.
yeah, just stop talking now, please.
Yeah, I mean, and then I'd be like, dig for something deep, and all I can come up with is you're welcome. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. What do you want to say?
Stop saying that. Stop saying that. What you gonna do with me? How many sessions, and can I get a discount?
Maybe. If you give me your shoes. Yeah.
Oh, well, there it is.
Not stop saying that, girl. Be quiet.
Hush. Thanks. That's enough. You topped me off today.
Oh, but isn't it crazy that like we spend so much time warding off the very thing that we like have spent years crying out for?
Oh my gosh, I need it. Because if they don't say it, I'm gonna be like, God, do I matter at all?
Am I doing this right? Do I have the impact like you? And like I just think about the seasons of my life where I was like face down on the ground, looking absolutely bonkers, crying out like, God, no one loves me but you. No one sees me, you. No one cares. And now like Diamond, my good friend, she said this earlier. She said, you're seen. You are seen. And I was like, thank you. Like I am seen. And I think sometimes the enemy will make us want to cringe when we receive the blessing we spent years like asking God for. And so now I'll be like, I am seen, and I enjoy it. And it's okay to enjoy it. You ever feel guilty enjoying it when people celebrate you?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You got to pretend like you're like fake humble.
You got to be humble.
But like, I don't remember where I heard it, but I remember hearing humble is not downplaying your greatness. Humble is staying in the assigned position God has placed you. Mm-hmm. This is the assigned position. So, I'm going to receive the compliments, say thank you so much. And I'm not going to pretend I don't like the perks because I prayed for these perks when I was in the hospital, almost lost my life with my son. I prayed for these perks, when I was like wondering if I wanted to live anymore. So I've been processing that in therapy.
Really?
How other people feel about me joyfully receiving what God's blessed me with. Because I think it makes other people uncomfortable, and that's what makes me uncomfortable.
Okay. Yeah, I think especially, I'm protective, especially on social media, because I really be trying to like make sure that I take into consideration all of the different scenarios. So like,
there's too many of them.
There's just so many. It'd be one I missed.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize it.
How did you not think about the fact that I can't wear the color red? Because my mama used to wear red, and she's gone now. And now I'm hurt. How dare you? You don't hear from the Lord.
And then all I do is add to the list, can't wear red.
Cannot wear red. Please choose maroon next time.
No, I think that's such a worthy journey of learning to really stand in it without fear of coming off as arrogant or prideful.
Yeah, and being okay with other people wrestling with the reality that to them I may be.
Yeah.
That's a wrestle between you and God. Mm-hmm. That's hands-on contact. That's between you and him. I can't get into that fight because I got my own battles. So if you're upset about what it looks like for me to do what God's called me to do, then, it makes me think about Paul with the disciples. They didn't like anything he was doing.
Yeah.
But like they watched long enough to be like, ooh, okay, maybe he was really doing what God's called him to do. Let's partner with him. So some people are in different parts of process and they may not like what I'm doing right now, how I'm doing it, how I receive it. Either they'll catch on or they won't, but I can't remember the names of some of the people I cried over 10 years ago.
Jesus. Erased them. Just
gone.
Just tears wiped them right away.
Into the ether. Literally.
Yeah.